When love shatters, only ashes remain, or the fire of revenge. Alexander had always believed he was a good husband, loyal, devoted, willing to sacrifice anything for his family. But that night, as his wife poured the wine with trembling hands and introduced him, reality fractured, and something inside him broke beyond repair. "I want you to share me with him." The words were soft, almost gentle, but they ripped through him like a blade. And the man in the doorway, calm, confident, standing there as if he already belonged, only added fuel to the fire. How far can a man go when he has nothing left to lose? Will Alexander break, or turn his pain into his greatest weapon? This is not just a story of betrayal. This is a chess game where every move leads to the final checkmate, where the illusion of love becomes a battlefield. Ready to step into the abyss? Hello, my friend. I'm so glad you stopped by my channel. If it's your first time here, don't forget to subscribe and like this video, as every like truly inspires me. Please tell me which city and country you watch this video from. Now, let's get started. I had always considered myself a devoted husband, not perfect, of course. I had flaws, as any man does. But I put in the effort, stayed faithful, and placed my wife, Abigail, above everything else. We had been together for 12 years, 9 of them as husband and wife. I believed our marriage was strong, unshakable. Over time, things had inevitably changed. The passion that once burned fiercely between us had settled into something quieter, more routine. But wasn't that how love worked? People grow comfortable, assuming their bond will withstand the years. Perhaps that was my mistake, assuming love alone was enough. The signs had been there, obvious in hindsight, but I had refused to see them. The late nights, the way she was always on her phone, the way she tensed at my touch as if I were a stranger. I dismissed it all. She was stressed, I told myself. Work was demanding. Life was just getting in the way. Then one evening, she asked me to sit down with her at the dinner table. Her hands shook as she poured the wine, and there was something in her expression, something unfamiliar, something unsettling. "I need to talk to you," she said, her voice strained. I waited. She forced a nervous smile before gesturing toward the hallway. A man stepped forward, emerging from the shadows, calm, unhurried, as though he belonged there, as if he had always belonged there. "This is Ryan," she said. "He's going to be living with us." I stared at her, the words refusing to take shape in my mind. "I want you to share me with him." A thick silence choked the room. Abigail reached for my hand, but I recoiled. The place where her fingers brushed my skin burned. Slowly, I pushed back my chair, my movements deliberate, my mind a void. Something inside me shifted, took control. I stood, my footsteps steady, as I moved toward the bedroom. My hand found the nightstand drawer, fingers curling around the cold steel hidden within. When I returned, Abigail's breath caught in her throat, her eyes wide with alarm. "What are you doing?" she whispered. Ryan stiffened, shifting in his seat, his hand slipping beneath the table. A weapon? A blade? A gun? I didn't know, and I didn't care. I lifted the magnum, its weight grounding me. I aimed at his head. That was when the nightmare truly began. Abigail and I had met in college. She was the kind of woman who captivated a room without trying, beautiful, sharp-witted, and impossible to ignore. I was ordinary, unremarkable, but I made her laugh. For a time, that had been enough. We built a life together, a home, a family. Our daughter, Elena, was 5 now. She had Abigail's striking green eyes and my stubborn will. She was my world. I worked tirelessly to provide for them, long hours, late nights, all to make sure they had everything they needed. And Abigail? She was supposed to be my anchor, my refuge, my heart. Yet here I stood, in my own home, gripping a gun, staring at the woman I had sacrificed everything for as she clung to another man. Ryan was younger, maybe in his late 20s, broad-shouldered, radiating confidence. He didn't flinch. There was no fear in his gaze, just something worse. Pity. Like I was something small, insignificant. Abigail stepped between us. "Put it down," she pleaded, her voice unsteady. "You think I'm overreacting?" My voice was foreign to me, hollow and sharp. "You bring a man into our house, and expect me to just accept it?" She swallowed hard. "I didn't want to deceive you. I wanted to be honest." "Honest?" A bitter laugh escaped me. "Honest would have been telling me before you slept with him." Ryan tensed. "Look, man." I cut him off, turning the gun toward him. "You don't get to speak." He fell silent. Abigail began to cry. "I love you," she said through her tears. "I still love you, but I love Ryan too." My grip tightened, the gun heavy in my hands. "You don't get to do this to me," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, thick with anger. "You don't get to destroy our family and expect me to just accept it." "I'm not destroying anything," she insisted. "Ryan and I talked about it, and we think this could work." A deep red haze clouded my vision. "You and Ryan talked about it? And where was I in this conversation?" She flinched. "I was scared. I didn't know how to tell you." "Scared of what?" My voice cracked. "That I'd say no? That I'd remind you you're my wife?" Abigail wiped her tears, straightening as her expression hardened. "I'm not just your wife, Alexander," she said, her voice steady. "I'm a person. I have needs." I exhaled slowly, the weight of the gun suddenly unbearable. The woman standing before me was no longer the woman I had once loved, and maybe, just maybe, she never had been. A sharp crack rippled through my chest, as if something inside me had snapped in two. I loved her. I had sacrificed everything, my time, my energy, my very essence, to build a life with her. And now, she was standing before me, calmly telling me I wasn't enough? Ryan stepped forward, his tone level but firm. "Look, man, just walk away. Cool off." My grip tightened around the trigger. Then, a small voice from the hallway cut through the tension. "Daddy?" Elena stood there, clutching her stuffed rabbit, her wide eyes shimmering with uncertainty and fear. I froze. Abigail sucked in a breath, then turned swiftly, reaching out for our daughter. "Sweetheart, go back to bed." Elena ignored her. Instead, she darted toward me, wrapping her tiny arms around my leg. "Why are you mad, Daddy?" A lump formed in my throat. Kneeling down, I placed the gun on the table and pulled her close. My little girl. My world. A light touch on my shoulder. Abigail's voice, soft yet insistent. "Alexander, please." I knocked her hand away, my voice devoid of warmth. "Get him out of my house, now." Abigail hesitated, her gaze flickering between me and Ryan. And then, she did the one thing that shattered me completely. She reached for his hand. Her fingers slipped into his as if it were second nature. Her voice, barely above a whisper, carried more weight than any scream. "I think you should leave." Ryan stood beside her, wearing an expression of quiet triumph, as though my world crumbling was a victory he had already claimed. I stared at them. The woman who had once vowed to stand beside me forever, and the man who had taken my place. A part of me withered and died. But something darker stirred beneath the wreckage. I didn't leave. That night, I sat in my car in the driveway, my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. My house, my home, was no longer mine. They were inside, probably tangled in the bed I used to share with her. The thought twisted inside me like a blade. Then, through the silence, I heard the soft, muffled cries coming from Elena's bedroom window. That was the only thing that kept me from marching inside and doing something I could never undo. I didn't sleep. I didn't eat. I barely moved. I sat there, suffocating under the weight of betrayal, replaying every moment, every choice, every mistake. Why? What had I done to deserve this? The answer came the next day. Abigail sat across from me in a quiet cafe, the same place we used to visit every Sunday before she tore our life apart. She looked composed, too composed, as if this was nothing more than another errand to cross off her list. Stirring her coffee, she let out a slow sigh. I never wanted to hurt you. My voice was ice. Then why did you? She exhaled, as if speaking to me was an exhausting chore. Because I felt trapped. I needed more. My jaw clenched. So instead of talking to me, you ran to another man? She rolled her eyes, unimpressed. Ryan isn't just another man. He understands me. A bitter chuckle escaped my lips, hollow and humorless. And what exactly does he understand that I don't? She hesitated, then met my gaze directly. You stopped wanting me, Alexander. The words were a dagger to the heart. You became predictable, safe, boring. A fissure cracked open inside me. My voice was low, edged with something dangerous. Boring? I had bled for this family, worked myself to exhaustion to build a life for her, for our daughter, and I was the one who had become dull? She sighed again, as if my frustration was nothing but an inconvenience. Yes, just like that. As if all of this, her betrayal, my suffering, had always been my fault. As if I had driven her into another man's arms. She lifted her cup and took a slow sip of coffee, completely unaffected. And then she spoke the words that sent ice through my veins. Ryan wants to adopt Elena. Everything inside me went still. Over my dead body. Abigail arched a brow, her expression almost amused. You left, Alexander. You walked out. You abandoned your family. I didn't abandon anyone, I shot back. You forced me out. Semantics. She shrugged. The court won't see it that way. And in that moment, I saw her clearly. Not the woman I had married, not the woman I had loved. I saw the manipulator who had played me for a fool from the very beginning. Leaning forward, I kept my voice quiet, lethal. You really think I'm just going to sit back and let you take my daughter? Abigail smirked. I think you don't have a choice. I stared at her, the woman I had once envisioned a lifetime with. Then, after a long pause, I nodded. Okay. She blinked, momentarily thrown by how easily I relented. She didn't know. She couldn't see. She had no idea of the storm that was coming. If she had thought I was boring before, she was about to learn just how wrong she had been. For 2 weeks, I played my role to perfection. I became exactly what Abigail expected. I was shattered, desperate, utterly broken. I let her see me sleeping in my car, let her believe I had surrendered. I stopped arguing, stopped fighting for the house. Most importantly, I stopped fighting for Elena. At least, that's what Abigail believed. The truth? I was setting the stage for something far colder, far more calculated than she could ever imagine. She had underestimated me. That was her first mistake. It would also be her last. She believed she had me figured out, predictable, uninspired. She was about to learn just how mistaken she was. The first strike. It all started with the finances. What Abigail never suspected was that, for years, I had been meticulously safeguarding my wealth, discreetly shifting assets, and securing accounts under different identities. Call it caution, or call it foresight, but I never fully trusted anyone, not even my wife, with control over my earnings. In one decisive move, I drained every cent from our shared account, leaving it barren. The next morning, Abigail's frantic voice burst through the phone. Alexander? The bank just called. Our account is empty. Did you do this? I exhaled, letting a tired edge creep into my voice. Oh yeah, I needed it to start over. You took everything? Well, I replied evenly. Technically, that was my income funding that account, wasn't it? Silence. Then her tone sharpened like a blade. You selfish bastard. A laugh nearly escaped me. Selfish? That's rich coming from the woman who had another man in our home. You'll be fine, I added smoothly. After all, you have Ryan now, don't you? I disconnected the call before she could respond. Step 1, complete, the second strike. Ryan was next. I had done my research. He wasn't just some casual fling, he was a parasite. A man with no real career, no savings, nothing to his name beyond a gym membership, and an Instagram feed flooded with flexing selfies. Worse, his past was as ugly as his character. I reached out to an old contact, Detective Larry Cordetti. We weren't friends, but I had once done him a favor he hadn't forgotten. Ryan Halverson, I told him. I need every scrap of dirt you can find. Cordetti's brow lifted, but he didn't question it. A few hours later, he handed me a folder thick with evidence. Ryan had a history: 3 arrests for aggravated assault, bar fights, road rage. There was even a hushed-up case involving an ex-girlfriend that had been settled privately. That was all I needed. That night, I sent Abigail an anonymous email. Attached were copies of Ryan's arrest records, along with a single-line message. This is the man raising your daughter. The reaction was immediate. My phone rang past midnight, her voice vibrating with panic. You son of a... You're trying to ruin my life. Me? I asked, feigning innocence. No, Abigail. I'm just making sure you know exactly who you've chosen. Ryan wouldn't... He's not like that anymore. I chuckled. Oh? Maybe you should ask the woman who needed stitches after he threw her through a wall. Silence. I knew what was happening. Doubt had begun to gnaw at her, seeping into the cracks of her choices. Step 2. Complete. The final strike. Elena was never meant to stay with Abigail. That much had always been clear. It was time to act. One evening, while Abigail was out, I picked Elena up from school. We stopped for ice cream, her small feet swinging beneath the table as she happily devoured her cone. Daddy, she murmured between bites, do I have to live with Mommy? I clenched my jaw. Do you want to? She hesitated, staring down at her melting treat. I miss you. I pressed a kiss to her forehead. I miss you too, sweetheart. By morning, Abigail woke to an empty house. Elena was gone. This wasn't a visit, not a weekend away. I had taken her permanently. Every detail had been accounted for. New home, fresh documents, everything arranged long before she even suspected a thing. By the time Abigail grasped what had happened, we were already beyond her reach. I left her a final message. You chose Ryan. I chose my daughter. Enjoy your freedom. And just like that, she got exactly what she wanted, an escape from responsibility. And I was finally free of her. Abigail's downfall. Of course, I kept an eye on her. Not out of longing, God no, but to watch her descent into ruin. Predictably, it didn't take long. Losing Elena shattered her. She ran to the police, screamed to anyone who would listen that I had kidnapped our daughter. But I had anticipated this. The custody battle had already been shifting in my favor. My legal team was ruthless. They exposed her infidelity, her recklessness, her decision to bring a dangerous man into Elena's life. And the courts? They don't look kindly on mothers who endanger their children. I won full custody. Abigail was granted supervised visitation, but she never came. She was too busy sinking into her own misery. Ryan unmasked. Once the money was gone, once the house was empty, once reality set in, Ryan changed. The charming, carefree man she had chosen over me. He disappeared, replaced by someone bitter, resentful. Abigail once longed for romance, dreaming of a love that would sweep her off her feet. Instead, she found herself trapped with a man whose anger simmered just beneath the surface, waiting for any excuse to erupt, until, inevitably, it turned on her. She called me only once, just once. A final, desperate attempt to reach out. Her voice was unsteady, barely holding together. Alexander, he hit me. I closed my eyes, inhaling slowly. Of course he did. I don't know what to do, she whispered. I'm scared. My fingers drummed lightly against the desk as I gazed out the window. The street beyond was calm, peaceful, so far removed from the life she had chosen. Elena was here, safe, untouched by any of it. You made your choice, Abigail. My voice was measured, distant. Now live with it. Silence. Then a sharp, choked sob before the line went dead. That was the last time I heard from her. That was the end of it. Where is she now? I have no idea. Last I knew, she had packed her things and vanished, drifting 3 states away, struggling to scrape by in a job that barely kept her afloat. And Ryan? He moved on, found someone younger, someone easier to control. The moment Abigail had nothing left to give, he discarded her without a second thought. As for me, I rebuilt. It wasn't simple, but I put myself back together piece by piece. I found someone who understood what love was meant to be. Elena thrived. She barely even remembered Abigail. And maybe that was for the best. Because in the end, Abigail got exactly what she wanted. She craved adventure. She demanded freedom. She wanted a life without me. And I made sure she had all of it. This story has come to an end. Betrayal isn't just pain. It's a point of no return. When trust is shattered, everyone has a choice, to break or to rise stronger. Alexander learned too late that love isn't just about devotion, but respect. And without respect, even the strongest bonds are doomed. But revenge is not freedom. It only drags you deeper into darkness. True strength isn't in destroying the past, but in leaving it behind. Those who betray aren't worth revenge or hatred. The worst punishment for them is living with the choices they made. What's your opinion? Share it in the comments, my friend. And if you like this story, check out other exciting videos on my channel. I'll say goodbye until the next video. See you. How do you know when your marriage is no longer a marriage, but just an illusion? For 5 years, Andrew believed he had a solid, loving relationship with Hannah. They rarely fought, always supported each other, and their life together felt predictable, in a comforting way. But then, something changed. It started with small things, distant glances, empty kisses, awkward silences. Then came the sudden disappearances, mood swings, and evasive answers. The truth was closer than he ever imagined, and when it finally surfaced, it hit harder than he could have ever prepared for. Love, betrayal, manipulation. This wasn't just about emotions, it was about everything he thought was real. Are you ready to find out how it all ends? Hello, my friend. I'm so glad you stopped by my channel. If it's your first time here, don't forget to subscribe and like this video, as every like truly inspires me. Now, let's get started. My name is Andrew, and for the past 5 years, I believed I was part of a happy marriage. Hannah and I had what most would call a stable and functional relationship. We rarely fought, always supported each other, and our life together felt predictable in a comforting way. Isn't that what marriage is supposed to be? A bond where you grow together, create something lasting, and trust that no matter what obstacles appear, you'll face them side by side. That's what I thought, until recently. Something had shifted between us. At first I barely noticed. It was subtle. Small changes that could easily be dismissed as stress, exhaustion, or just an off week. But as time went on, those minor differences became impossible to overlook. Hannah had always been affectionate. She used to greet me at the door with a warm embrace, sometimes pulling me in for a kiss that lingered just long enough to make me feel missed. Lately, though, her kisses had turned into mere formality, quick, indifferent pecks, the kind you'd give an acquaintance rather than a spouse. Our conversations, which once felt effortless, now felt forced. We used to talk about everything, but when I asked about her day, she'd reply with clipped, hollow answers. The warmth in her voice had faded. The laughter, the playful teasing, the deep connection we had. It had all disappeared. We weren't living as a couple anymore. We were just 2 people sharing a space. And then, there were her mood swings. Some days she seemed lost in thought, distant, unreachable. Other times, the smallest thing would set her off, snapping at me over nothing. When I asked if something was wrong, she always dismissed it with a curt, "I'm fine." Each time I tried to dig a little deeper. "Are you sure?" I'd ask. And every time she would repeat the same empty phrase, "I'm fine, Andrew." But I knew better. Something was off, and the more I tried to understand, the more unsettled I felt. I thought back to when we first fell in love, the late nights where we lost track of time talking, the way we'd curl up together in bed, whispering about our future. We had been inseparable. But now, it felt as if she were slipping away, retreating like the tide pulling away from the shore. So, I tried harder. I planned date nights, made an effort to check in with her more often, took on extra household tasks, hoping she'd see that I was trying, hoping she'd respond. But nothing changed. The distance between us only grew, stretching wider with each passing day. One night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, feeling suffocated by the silence between us. We hadn't been intimate in months, and I didn't understand why. Desperate for answers, I spent hours online, reading articles about reviving relationships, scrolling through forums filled with people just as lost as I was. A common theme kept coming up: physical touch. Reconnecting through touch, it seemed, could reignite emotional closeness. It made sense. Lately, Hannah and I had barely touched at all. No casual brushes of fingers, no affectionate gestures, just those obligatory kisses when they happened at all. I decided to start small. Reaching over, I gently took her hand, hoping the simple act would create some kind of bridge between us. But the moment my skin met hers, she flinched and pulled away as if my touch repulsed her. "Just leave me alone," she muttered, her voice devoid of warmth. I turned on my side, unwilling to give up. "Hannah, please talk to me," I said quietly. "Did I do something? What's wrong?" She didn't respond. She didn't even look at me. She lay there, motionless, as if waiting for me to give up. I hesitated before reaching out again, this time resting a hand on her shoulder, silently begging for any sign that she still cared, that we weren't completely lost. And then she snapped. She turned sharply, her voice sharp as a blade. "Don't touch me. I can't stand you." The words hit me like a gut punch. My whole body tensed as though I had been physically struck. I searched her face, hoping to see regret, hoping she hadn't meant it. But there was nothing. Just cold detachment. I had no words. My mind went blank. I rolled onto my back and stared at the ceiling, numb. For the first time since our wedding day, I wasn't sure our marriage could be saved. I stopped asking questions, not because I didn't want to know the truth, but because I already knew I wouldn't get an answer. Instead, I observed. I paid attention to the small details in the days that followed. Hannah had started falling asleep in unusual places. I found her dozing off at the dining table, her head resting on her folded arms, her laptop still open. One afternoon, I walked into the living room and saw her curled up on the couch, her phone clutched in her hand, the screen dim from inactivity. This wasn't like her. Hannah had never been the kind of person to fall asleep just anywhere. And then, there were the mornings. Even after a full night's rest, she looked drained. Some days, she rushed straight to the bathroom, and minutes later, I'd hear the toilet flush, like she had been sick, like she had thrown up. Something was wrong, and deep down, I feared that I had already lost her. Recently, the most unsettling thing was how often Hannah was vanishing from the house. She had never been the type to keep things from me. If she had errands to run, she would casually mention them. If she had plans with friends, she always let me know where she was going and who she was meeting. But lately, she had started slipping away without a word. I would come home from work to an empty house. No note, no message, no indication of where she had gone. Hours later, she would return, acting as though she had never been missing at all, her demeanor perfectly nonchalant. Whenever I asked about her whereabouts, she would dodge the question, making me feel as if I were the unreasonable one for even bringing it up. The idea of following her briefly crossed my mind, but I knew I wouldn't be able to do it discreetly. Instead, I hired a private investigator. It only took a week to get an answer. "We have confirmation," the investigator informed me. And just like that, everything snapped into place. Hannah was seeing someone else. That was the reason for her sudden distance, the reason she avoided my eyes, the reason I felt like a stranger in my own marriage. I could have confronted her immediately, thrown the proof in front of her, demanded she explain herself, watched as she tried to justify her betrayal. But I didn't. Because in that instant, I understood something far more devastating. Hannah had already made her decision. She had chosen someone else over me. And I refused to be the kind of man who begged for love that had already been given away. No, she didn't deserve the satisfaction of a confrontation. She deserved to be blindsided. My mind was made up. I would divorce her, and she wouldn't see it coming. One evening, I came home early, determined to find an important document my lawyer had requested for the divorce proceedings. I had been putting it off, but now was the time. I went straight to the bedroom, moving toward my section of the closet where I kept my important paperwork. I flipped through folders, sifted through bank statements and old receipts, but the document was nowhere to be found. Frustrated, I exhaled sharply, running a hand down my face. Maybe I had placed it somewhere else. Then a thought struck me. What if Hannah had inadvertently put it with her things? It wouldn't be the first time something of mine ended up on her side of the closet. Without much consideration, I started going through her belongings. But instead of the missing document, my hands found something that sent ice through my veins. Inside a simple white envelope was a folded sheet of paper. When I opened it, my breath caught in my throat. It was an ultrasound scan. For a few moments, my brain refused to process what I was looking at. Hannah was pregnant. My hands trembled as I examined the paper, my eyes scanning the details. Over a month along. My heartbeat thundered in my ears. She had never mentioned this to me. Why? I checked the date of the ultrasound, trying to piece together the timeline. Was this why she had been so distant? The reason for her sudden irritability, for the way she barely tolerated my presence? And then, a far more sinister thought took hold. Was the baby even mine? This wasn't something I could sit on. I couldn't pretend I hadn't found this. I needed answers, immediately. The rest of the evening was a blur, my mind spiraling, my emotions tangled between fury and disbelief. Time lost meaning until the sound of keys in the front door snapped me back to the present. Hannah stepped inside, unaware of the storm she was walking into. Her phone was in one hand, her gaze locked on the screen, not even glancing up. I didn't give her time to settle. "How long have you known?" The question left my lips before I could stop myself, sharp and unyielding. She froze mid-step. Her posture stiffened, her mouth opening slightly, but no words came. A tense silence stretched between us until she finally swallowed, her voice barely above a whisper. I was going to tell you." I let out a dry, humorless laugh. "Going to tell me?" I repeated, pushing off the couch, my body coiled with tension. "Why would you need time to tell your husband he's going to be a father? Or is it because you don't know if I am?" The second those words escaped my mouth, I saw it. The briefest flicker of hesitation. Hannah quickly tried to recover, squaring her shoulders as she blurted out, "Of course it's yours." I didn't believe her. Not for a second. "We'll do a DNA test," I said, my voice low, unwavering. That was when she shattered. A strangled sob tore from her throat. "I don't know," she admitted, her voice breaking. "I don't know who the father is." It felt like the air had been sucked from the room. For months, I had sensed something was wrong. I had questioned myself, doubted my instincts, convinced myself I was being paranoid. But now, I had the answer I never wanted. I took a slow, measured breath, forcing my voice to remain steady even as everything we had built crumbled around me. Prepare yourself. The finalization of the divorce is imminent. Hannah crumbled to the floor, tears streaming down her face as she begged me to reconsider. She pleaded for one last chance, urging me to listen before making an irreversible decision. But I was long past the point of caring. There was nothing she could say that would change anything. She didn't accept it quietly. The sorrow quickly gave way to fury, and she fought tooth and nail to drag out the proceedings. Every step of the way she resisted, determined to make the divorce as excruciating as possible. She demanded the house, financial support, anything she could grasp from the wreckage of our 5-year marriage. She convinced herself she deserved compensation. I refused to take the bait. My lawyer handled everything. I wouldn't give her the satisfaction of an emotional battle. Then came the paternity test. When the results confirmed what I had already suspected, that the child wasn't mine, her defenses crumbled. No more justifications. No more frantic explanations. With no leverage left, the court ruled in my favor, and she walked away with little to show for all her efforts. Not once have I regretted my decision. Had I stayed, had I allowed her to ensnare me with hollow words and manipulative apologies, I would have been trapped in a life that was never mine to begin with, raising another man's child. By the time the legal battle concluded, I had already severed myself emotionally. The endless deceptions, the conflicts, the exhausting courtroom confrontations, it had all drained me beyond repair. Months later, I finally uncovered the full scope of her betrayal. Piece by piece, through whispers from mutual acquaintances and evidence surfaced in court, the truth came to light. When Hannah discovered she was pregnant, she turned to the man for whom she had risked everything. In her mind, she believed leaving me meant securing something better, that her infidelity had been worth the destruction of our marriage. Perhaps she even hoped her lover would prove her right, that he would embrace the situation and start a new life with her. But reality hit her like a freight train. He wanted no part of it. Without hesitation, he urged her to get rid of the baby. He wasn't ready to be a father. He had no intention of adjusting his life for her or the child. And just like that, the illusion she had clung to collapsed. Hannah was left in the ruins of her own choices. She had burned every bridge, believing she was trading up, only to realize she had gambled everything and lost. That's when resentment took over. Rather than face the truth that she had single-handedly dismantled her own life, she let her bitterness consume her. Instead of holding herself accountable, she redirected her fury toward me. That was why she grew distant. That was why she couldn't even meet my gaze. It was never about me. She was repulsed by her own actions, seething with regret for abandoning a faithful husband for a man who discarded her the moment things got complicated. I was nothing more than an easy target for her self-hatred, remorse, and misplaced anger. By the time I pieced everything together, it no longer mattered. I had already walked away. And for that, I am thankful. If I had ignored the warning signs, if I had allowed denial to keep me tethered to a lie, I would have spent my life raising a child that was never mine. That's the harsh truth. Some men choose to blind themselves. They silence that gnawing feeling in their gut, convincing themselves their wife is merely going through a phase, believing that if they just hold on a little longer, she'll come back to them. But let me tell you this. When someone is done with you, you will feel it. I felt it, and I trusted my instincts. A divorce is far better than living in a lie. That's the lesson I've learned. That's the truth I stand by. This story has come to an end. This story, filled with pain and betrayal, teaches an important moral lesson. You cannot ignore the obvious and hope that things will fix themselves. In life, there are moments when we must make difficult choices, hold on to the past, or let it go for the sake of our future. The protagonist trusted his instincts, put himself first, and refused to let deception ruin his life. Love and loyalty must be mutual, and when trust is broken, living in denial only prolongs the pain. Sometimes, walking away is not a defeat, but the only path to true freedom. What's your opinion? Please tell me which city and country you watched this video from, and I'll say goodbye to you until the next video. Goodbye.